Today's episode is Video Games and Trauma Recovery, Episode 6. What is recovery? What the heck do I mean when I talk about that? Let's see. You want to hang out with me and Pinocchio? I finally talk about games this time, I swear.
And I was like, what? When the mind stopped practicing the ukulele.
It's Hannah and Pinocchio. We're here to talk about games.
Jeez, cheer up, big guy.
I just finished a 2-part video about trauma, giving examples of trauma that happened in my life. And today's episode, I'm going to be going more into kind of like a tiny bit of what that felt like physically and emotionally while it was happening, and the detrimental effects it's had on my development as a human person. And then I'm going to dive right into all the great things that I've developed as tools. I'm going to have to cut this, but I'm going to have to keep it in because he's so cute. For the purposes of this discourse, I define trauma as something that shakes your understanding, safety, or security. I gave several examples in my last 2 videos about things that had a lasting negative impact on my ability to function well as an adult. I tried my best to be vague enough to avoid a severe trauma dump on all of you, but contextual and vulnerable enough to give you a better understanding of where I'm coming from and where I am at this point on my journey. This is a processing experience for me more than anything else. Secondary goals are to help someone else feel seen, heard, validated, or less alone, or help someone feel empathy or gain understanding. This is pretty self-motivated, sharing all of this on YouTube. It's helping me gain my confidence, find my voice, clear the haze in my mind, and find connection. With all of that being said, I plan on today's video being a lot more fun. I'll briefly go over what being triggered or experiencing a trauma response feels like in my body and mind, again keeping things fairly anecdotal, then outline what my recovery has been like and looks like now, what I want it to look like later, and how video games fit into this whole mess. I'll talk about how my collection began as a trauma response, and how not all trauma responses are inherently negative, but I do believe they're important to recognize. I'll give examples of recovery techniques that I've tried, what's worked and what hasn't. Overall, I want this video to just be a happy, comforting time where I get to talk about things that are actually pretty great. I hope you'll join me. It's been a long, lonely road up to this point. Trauma responses and triggers. At this stage in my life, I don't have to struggle with flashbacks or out-of-body experiences, or even panic attacks as much as at some points in my life. I've worked pretty hard to get past some difficult things that used to follow me in a very damaging way. Everyone's experience with trauma is different, part of what I hope to highlight with my last videos. I don't want anyone to see this series and take it as psychiatric advice. It's only my experience and my journey, and I expect it to change as I continue to grow. If yours is different, I don't mean to detract from or invalidate it in any way. When I'm triggered or having a trauma response, it usually presents itself as conversational distress. I would say this manifests as incredible discomfort I try to conceal as I attempt to figure out how to navigate the part of the discussion that's become difficult. The discomfort can be a combination of sweating, difficulty breathing, thinking in spirals and finding it hard to focus or remember the true purpose of the conversation, getting paranoid, having painful memories pop up, making lists of other times I haven't understood or been understood, and usually some unfortunate ideation. These aren't choices I'm making or things I'm choosing to dwell on, but what my body and mind gives me when overstimulated in certain ways or settings. Sometimes I just go quiet, stuck thinking terrible, awful things for hours or days. I always withdraw. It hurts, like behind the eyeballs and inside my guts. I'm tired during and afterwards, and it kind of feels like when you're in the middle of a nasty nightmare that just won't quit. So now the tough definitions are thoroughly out of the way, I think we can finally move on to what recovery looks like, for me anyway. Recovery? What's that? I'm choosing to look at recovery at this stage in my life a bit like remission from cancer. I really hope that's not, offensive to people with cancer. I've always thought of myself as someone who lives with depression, lives with ideation, lives with anxiety, lives with PTSD, etc. I'm choosing to reframe that this year, that I am someone in recovery. I am someone who is not actively under threat and who is on the road to a healthy life. So what does recovery look like? It's taken a few forms as I've tried to stay above water in this crazy life, and I think that's the most important point I could make. It'll look different for you than for me 10 years from now, than for me 5 years ago. I think if you're continuing to grow, your needs will continue to change. Maybe eventually I'll just consider it living, but for now, I'm in recovery. A catalyst. There have been several times in my life when I've taken my mental health more seriously and really desperately tried to get things under control. I first remember asking for a therapist when I was around 16, after I'd suffered abuse for the second time in my life. My mother was pretty sure I only wanted to get on birth control and complain about her, so I stopped advocating for myself and didn't proceed with treatment. I didn't get another therapist until maybe a decade later. I chose to go with a religious therapist because I thought she would understand the language around my trauma of growing up in a cult and perhaps help me bridge the gap between me and my parents. That was so important to me at the time, learning to connect with them and get them out of the grips of the church. It didn't go well. The therapist and I respected, cared about, and understood each other, but we were unable to really address the things that were causing me the most problems. I was very scattered at the time, working too much and back in college and struggling with some marital problems. I got my degree and started a plan to move back to Michigan from Colorado. I also got a new therapist, much better suited to me, and a beautiful emotional support cat named Pinocchio, who reminded me what love and joy felt like. When I moved home, it wasn't long after that my mother fell ill with the current plague. I don't want to get too much into it, but this event was one of the true beginnings of my rebirth. I had been spending so much of myself trying to find ways to reconnect with my family, ways to give them a chance without hurting myself, without being disingenuous, trying to find ways to see things from their point of view. Then she didn't take a vaccine that could have saved her life, and now she's dead. There's a lot more in the in-betweens for sure, but to me, slowly it was becoming more and more simple. I received a very generous donation from my father after Mom's insurance came through. It seemed important to him to mention it that way, that she hadn't left me anything, but that he felt like giving it to me. I had a lot of traumatic responses to that in a short period of time, but I'll focus on the end result for the purposes of this video. I had never had the ability to just buy things for myself, let alone fun things that didn't serve a purpose. I decided I had spent enough of my life in pain and waiting for it to end. I would distract myself by teaching myself to have fun. I would really try to have fun. Basically, I decided I was going to buy a bunch of video games. How does recovery feel? If trauma is something that shakes your stability, security, and understanding, then recovery is anything that fits into the opposite of that. So again, that's going to be obviously different for everybody. For me, it has a lot to do with making a continual decision to keep trying new things, along with building healthy routines. What I tried that didn't work? Bad fit therapists, rumination beyond belief, introspection to the point of madness, ignoring the problem, thinking I could use helping someone else to feel better about my own issues, focusing on work, pretending I don't exist, living for someone else, and not having a cat. I don't recommend you give any of those a shot if you can help it. I gave it a lot of time, and that was all pretty craptastic. I did realize that my marriage was a big aspect of why I felt I couldn't work through some things in therapy and in my life. I took steps to remove myself from what had sadly become a pretty unhealthy situation. Obviously, that has a lot of other emotions and logistical steps and other things involved with it, but in short, it was a big part of my decision to take my life seriously again. Good fit therapy, regular tooth care, regular sleep, less alcohol consumption, all of those have worked pretty great for me. More exercise, more smoothies, more sunshine, less cannabis usage, more cats, and a better working situation. Those are all good steps too. I admit that my collection building was definitely a trauma response to my mom's death, my impending separation, and the strange feeling that for the first time in my life I had a bit of an emergency fund or cushion or buffer. It felt unfamiliar and brought up all the feelings and pain of having so little for so long. I don't really think I could handle all of it right then, and I really wanted to give up on just about everything. So I figured, why not blow it all on video games? See what happens. Maybe I'll find my joy, heal my inner child, and end up wanting to finish playing them all. While I do not advise that anyone spend an inordinate amount on a new hobby, I will say that video games have been an amazing, profoundly healing experience for me. I recommend them if you are struggling with rumination, obsession, trauma, emotional pain, late mental diagnosis, loneliness, or stress. I found there is probably something for everyone to enjoy, and it's been such a healthy and productive distraction for me. Educational recovery. I am hoping to go back to school. Yes, again. I'm looking into it with new eyes and a new resolve, and would be starting from a finished associate's degree with a whole heck of a lot more tools at my disposal. For the meantime, I am educating myself everywhere I can, trying to narrow down my vast list of interesting majors. I am learning so much through playing video games. My brain is working overtime, learning how to read screens, learn buttons, try new systems, compute all the data and stimuli, improve my hand-eye coordination, and develop patience, most of all. I'm learning to solve puzzles and think in different ways, and it's even helping me connect with other people, whether here on YouTube or out at the game stores. I'm practicing art through drawing and video editing. Trying new things is one of my biggest triggers, so I'm trying to build those synapses by continuing to start and finish new projects and push my limits in gentle, safe ways. I also sing and dance a lot right now. I know a lot of this might seem more personal than educational in terms of where it fits in my recovery, but I know the positive effects are filling in those gaps of what I didn't get from being stimulated while I was developing. Familial recovery. I've made the difficult decision to stop reaching out to my father or my mother's parents, at least for the time being. I had to realize that the last several panic attacks, the only moments this year when I slipped into really bad ideation, were when dealing with them. I cannot put myself and my recovery at risk with continued exposure to pain that serves no purpose. I'm trying to connect with my sisters. We're all adults now and we all like video games, so I think that's our best bonding spot for now. The thing about growing up the way we did, and especially with 3 years between each of us, is that we were encapsulated in very individual experiences. So I would say we don't know each other very well. Both of my sisters are mothers now, and I'm a bit of a misanthropic antinatalist. So it's not only tough to find the time, but also common ground. I'm hopeful I can become closer to them through the years, and I'm working on my anti-skills, however slowly. Physical recovery. I'm working on doing my yoga every day, doing my physical therapy exercises, going for regular walks, and most of all, learning to relax. It involves eating more fruit and protein, sleeping when I'm tired, not working too hard, and being patient with myself. An important note here. Sometimes this is really hard to work on. It requires perseverance I never learned, muscle groups that have been in pain for my whole life, and trying a lot of new things, which, as I've mentioned, is almost always a trigger for me in some way or another. The part where this feels good won't come until after a lot more work, but I'm trying to keep it up, and I have a very exciting fitness tool that I'm saving for that will help me take it to the next level. For now, I'm doing push-ups and deep breathing and hoping I can get a massage and another deprivation tank session sometime in the next month. I would like to eventually be able to afford to get back into PT and take a kickboxing class. I think that would be amazing for me to build body confidence and strength. peer relationship recovery. I'm hoping to work more on building relationships by getting back into school. I really think it'll help a lot. I have also taken the time to meet a few new people this year and develop some relationships here on the interwebs that have been really rewarding. I would love to get more involved in communities, so I'm getting back into my interests. Depression can make it difficult to feel like a whole person who can bring themselves to events and things. I'm starting small by reminding myself I love the ocean, animals, and literature. One day there will be a book club, a writing group, and who knows what else. Religious recovery. I'm finally at the point in my religious trauma recovery where I feel like I can laugh about it, and I think that's a huge step. I'm involved in the ex-fundy communities where I can find them, and I watch a lot of content, but I don't find discussion of church matters anywhere near as triggering and painful as earlier this year around my mom's death. Part of my religious recovery will probably always be helping others deconstruct what's been done to them, but I'm not quite as angry about it, finally. I'm actually playing a video game right now called Cult of the Lamb, and I'm finding the experience a bit of a riot instead of a tough time. I'm working on a mini-series of reviews about it, and I can't stop playing it. Parting words. A quick note about comparing oneself to others. There's one thing I think about most often during this whole process. People talk a lot about how when overcoming depression, or just in general, it's important not to compare yourself to other people. What no one talks about as much is how to manage that when you're someone who literally needs to learn how to become a person, almost from scratch. People like me who are left out of society for the majority of our life, what happens to us when we enter it? The kids who don't go back after Rumspringa, the kids growing up in the woods earning their fake diplomas, the kids who were kept home still have to learn how to function in this world out here. And that involves all sorts of things other people learn together, code switching and slang and behaviors, references and ways of thinking. I just think it's an overlooked aspect of recovery for people in my situation or situations similar to it. Neurodivergent people have no other choice but to compare ourselves to others in order to be accepted or successful most of the time. It's been a strange part of my recovery, accepting that other people may be onto something while also accepting that I just may be very different from them. Also, having people to look up to, I think, goes a long way for people to push themselves to do more. I'm trying to find more people to look up to. And that involves comparisons. It just does. I'm playing a game called Figment, and it's really beautiful. You play as a warrior in the mind, and your imagination has basically died and dried up, and you're not used anymore. The creative side of the person you inhabit has given up. And so you start journeying through the creative part to find your memories again, and it's just really special, and there's really beautiful little music and cool little battles, and I just got to walk across the little upside down caterpillar thing, and it's all squishy and its legs wiggle around, and it makes a special noise when you walk on it, and the music is just really peaceful and beautiful, and I think they did something really special with this game. Anyway, what do you think? How do you hold on during tough times? What's a success you've had recently? For me, it was finishing the 2 longest scripts I've ever written. See you in the next one. Hopefully, it'll be Cult of the Lamb. What are you doing, Pinocchio?